Yes, so here for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I will, it's my great pleasure, and thank you, Budewein, for letting me do so. I will talk about the global consensus, and it concerns a global initiative gathering expertise and professionals and stakeholders of the built environment in order to push for the right buttons, which will help us to develop the built environment in a more sustainable way in the future. So I will talk briefly about the grand challenge. I think it can never be repeated too much because it's somehow underestimated in society. People, they don't really realize what type of challenge we are facing. I will talk about the built environment, and then I will pick out a few selected parts of the globe consensus, which is a document, and I will also show you where you can find it. And finally, I will talk about how to engage with the globe consensus. So that is the plan. I was just taking a check on the time. As we all appreciate, but probably we don't appreciate it to the extent it deserves. The global community is facing approaching the limits of what the planetary system can sustain. So it's not just what we feel is acceptable or what we like or we don't like. We are simply running out of the capacities which the Earth system provides to us. And when we talk about exceeding these capacities, we are really addressing, and this is what our friends, the natural scientists, are helping us with. They are trying to understand to what extent can we push, can we demand the Earth system without having to face living conditions which will no longer provide the same welfare as we know it today. So I have been working in the World Economic Forum on an agenda which is called Global Catastrophic Risks, and the sustainability challenge is realized to be one of the scenarios, one of the threats we are facing, which could push the civilization to our knees. So it's something to take very serious. We have seen scientists talk about global temperature rise and fluctuations over time. What we are facing is the very end, at the right end of this figure. And we are in this part seeing the global rise of temperatures, and the International Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, they are coming up with renewed models every once in a while, and they don't look too good. So we are facing significant temperature rises, which will give us problems. And now we are fighting to reduce CO2 emissions, but there are other fronts we are fighting on at the same time. We know the built environment is a key instrument in society as we have it today. So I've indicated it here with a red line. We are providing a significant amount of functionalism to society. So it facilitates production, economy. It also takes out some of the economy. It provides life and safety, which we again can invest into human capital. But it also exploits the environment and natural resources to a degree that we need to do something about it. And the numbers are overwhelming. When we look at the coupling between what we call welfare or growth, it's also called, and material consumption and emissions to the environment, it's quite scaring when we look at the industry of scale. Just taking an inventory, not a very precise one, but just in rough numbers, we are now 500 cities with more than 1 million inhabitants, in total 6 billion buildings, millions of kilometers of roads, railways, tens of thousands of airports, dams, 500,000 of wind turbines as we are talking. We are approaching that. Significant numbers of gas and oil production platforms, nuclear reactor systems. But we are important in the built environment, also in the economic dimension. So it's a contributor to the free market by 10% of GDP is typical. Responsible also for 50% of global energy consumption. Structures alone, around 20–25% of global CO2 emissions. Concrete, out of that, as we know, somewhere estimated between 5 and 7, 8, 9% of global CO2 emissions, responsible for 90% of global material consumption, if we measure that in weight. And trends, well, if we just go back a few years, the concrete consumption in cubic meters in China over just 3 or 4 years is equal to what concrete has been spent in the United States over the last century. And global population, as we know, it's estimated to rise by 40% from now to 2050. So we, to the extent that we continue this coupled welfare growth and material consumption, we really need to be innovative to come up with a better handle on our consumption and the types and the way we are developing the built environment. Just alone in this decade from now until 2030, the number of square feet on the roof is estimated to grow by a factor of 2. So the challenges are enormous. If we cannot uncouple growth, welfare from resource consumption, then we better try not to build more than we absolutely need to, as little as possible. Major challenges as associated with the built environment is that regulation and design codes, they do not really address the performance of the built environment in this context, and neglecting increasingly complex interrelations between natural resources, environment, structures, mechanical systems, and society. And this is not just something going on in Denmark or in Sweden or the Netherlands. It's across the globe and into the future. Price, time, project deviations, and fulfillment of code requirements is basically the rule of the business rather than soundness and excellence of engineering concepts and solutions. And we have to turn that around. Just when you see at the ongoing revisions of the structural Eurocodes, there's no requirement to sustainability and very limited possibility to take benefit of proven concepts, methods, and best available knowledge. And there's a high focus on ease of use and limitation of responsibility, promoting the concept of cookbook design and management. The challenge is really global, and solutions, they have to be global. So we cannot focus on some scheme of CO2 neutral construction in the Netherlands or in Denmark, Germany. That's not going to help us. And the word CO2 neutral, I don't like too much because it's being used as a means to argue for compensating for the consumption and emissions of CO2. The globe actually started out with a workshop at Tongji University in 2019 among a group of researchers from China and international, wanted to try to see what can we do, how can we move forwards, which are the challenges. And that was the early stage of the global consensus. And in the time between then and now, the Joint Committee on Structural Safety, they took the initiative to bring this forward, this consensus document, which was called Tongji Consensus at the time. And under the auspices of the liaison committee of the 6 international organizations you see here on the slide, it was lifted up by engagement of an expert group comprised by these associations. It was basically re-edited, rewritten, and a consensus across these associations emerged. And this is now what we call the Globe Consensus. And it opens very boldly and contains a statement here that nothing less than transformative and united worldwide effort from all stakeholders of the construction sector is required for human society to be successful in sustainable developments and in the mitigation of the disastrous consequences of climate change at global and local scales. Even if all other sectors in our society will live up to the Paris Agreement, and we don't, us who are engaged in the built environment, then we are going to pull everybody down. So we really need to move. The contents of the Globe Consensus document contains objectives and main messages. It describes the challenge. And then it also outlines the new paradigm for governance of the built environment. And then it points at facilitators and actions facilitating sustainable structures. And there's a closing with a call for immediate actions. You can find the consensus document on this link provided by Rylem. I will not go through the document. I'll just highlight a few of the facilitators, namely that the civil engineering community has to commit to addressing the sustainability challenge and engage in and explore the potentials of new and emerging technologies in the pursuit of sustainable developments. Another issue here concerns an action, namely that leading objectives in operational practice in structural design and integrity management, they have to be redirected. And the emphasis has to be on sustainability impacts alongside with safety, reliability, and economy. And there has to be, for example, absolute requirements with respect to maximum allowable greenhouse gas emissions relative to service and function. Choices of strength, durability, and service life requirements for construction materials and structural components have to be taken on the basis of minimized environmental impact, life cycle analysis and optimization, as well as considering issues of technical obsolescence and efficiency in reuse and recycling. So it's not only recycling, it's definitely also reuse, second-hand structural components. Moreover, holistically accounting for the mutual interactions between structural concept, material choice, architecture, energy, and indoor climate concepts in their respective impacts on sustainability. Now, considering the way we are organized and the way we teach people and have been teaching people, this new perspective here definitely underlines that we need a much more integral understanding and conceptual understanding of our professionals in the domain. And here, concerning really the knowledge base and technology supporting sustainability in the built environment, we have to redesign engineering curricula to facilitate the assessment of sustainability through a holistic and integrative perspective. And we need a wide dissemination of new knowledge and technology through modern shaped educational activities and training of students and professionals at all levels. So how to engage with Globe, which I hope that you really will, because we have to make this really big thing worldwide. The associations already guarantee that we are global in the sense that they count members of more than 150 nation states across the world. But we need people, we need organizations signing up, and you can do that on the Globe support page. And there you can also share your thoughts on sustainability in the built environment. So there's no requirement for credit card numbers or anything like that. No, we are trying to push a development, and professionals signing up will show that it's important. You can also contribute to Globe with knowledge, share your insights and ideas with other Globe stakeholders from the private industry, public and expert stakeholders. You can reach out for Globe knowledge. Ask the Globe network for general specific knowledge, recommendations, reports, and data. And you can find collaborators at global scale for joint research and development projects, webinars, and educational activities. Not least, you can participate in and contribute to Globe educational activities. Thanks for, I think, yeah, thanks for your attention.
Okay. Michael, may I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
First of all, thank you very much. It's a very solid approach, I would say. I just have one particular problem, and that is with credible data on the CO2 emissions. There is very often a confusion between concrete and cement. Okay,
Yeah.
the 8% is the Portland cement production, I think, and according to Professor Koji Sakai from Japan, and he's also a leading member of the FIB. He has the last presentation I saw was that it was 7.1 billion tons of CO2 from the whole concrete industry. That means from including the transportation, of course, including including recycling. So I just hope that we will get data that are really reliable. But if it's between 8 and 18%, that is already a lot, I would say. Okay.
Most definitely. Now, the number I provided here is only related to cement production.
Yeah. Okay. And then I have a second question. We basically taught China, India, Vietnam, and Indonesia how you should build. Okay. So now we are saying, wait a minute, we should do it differently. How do we get them to join up with us with the transition we are obliged to make?
I think this is a super good question, Boudewijn. And here it is the point where we need to realize that the past practices where, let's say, countries like the United States of America, Australia, the European community, we have been writing standards and codes. And I don't know where we got the idea from, but we thought that these standards and codes could be exported to every corner of the world without any consideration of the geography and society, available resources and general living conditions, right? And cultural aspects as well. We should try to identify the right solutions at the right locations in the at the level of culture and community. This is how we need to approach it. But and this is why there can be no solution made behind an office in Brussels. It's not a possibility. We have to engage, joining the global community and helping each other to find generic, let's say, approaches which contain elements which are in principle valid no matter where in the world you are. And then we need to find the specific solutions which are relevant in the different places of the world. So we need to work from two fronts and engagement. So without global engagement, we will not be able to make it. And then, as I said, also this thing about CO2 neutrality, that was when you mentioned the numbers again from your Japanese colleague. This is a very, very big problem because if we talk about CO2 neutrality, we open up for the possibility that you can emit a certain big amount of CO2, but then you can buy compensation by, I don't know, you can buy certificates that you have invested into forests or that your energy comes from wind turbines. And this is all making this communication very murky. And nobody in the general population understand what we are talking about. they think if it's CO2 neutral, then it's probably good.
Yeah. Okay, well, lots of work.
May I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
I think what you have showed in the CO2 emission from the concrete is not the right figure, because when you calculate 300 kilogram of cement per cubic meter of concrete, and 1 ton of cement is emitting, let's say 1 ton of CO2, that means the concrete itself is emitting much more less. The most important thing is that concrete is most used material after the water. This is important.
True, the volume.
This is my comment. But I understand that it's informative.
Thank you. Okay, maybe it's time that we move on, and we will have Wolfram Schmidt to present from well-trained dogs to conscious decision makers, how engineering education has changed. Wolfram, are you ready?
Yes, thank you very much, Michael. And you already gave me the perfect buzzword when you said that the integral understanding of our discipline has to change. And basically, that's what the next approximately hour will be about, because my talk will just be the introduction of a series of presentations and videos, and also live communication. Maybe you have noticed that we do not only have guests from South Africa and Tanzania, but also from Kenya, I've seen, from Uganda, and particularly from Ghana. And we have a lot of children here also listening to us, but further becoming probably teachers to what we have to learn in the future. And therefore, I would also like to start with a slide looking back at a song which is pretty old, but it is quite a good picture related to the fact that today we are excited about technologies, that we are about to explore Mars, for example, and we believe that will bring us much forward. But this small guy in the beginning of the video of Ziggy Marley's song, Tomorrow People, he said, I don't want to go to another planet, I'd rather fix this one. And I really like the sentence, because I hope this guy, I mean, this was from 1988, I hope this guy is in the meantime a successful civil engineer and can probably really help to fix this planet. But the song is a little bit deeper. It is about the tomorrow people, and it asks, where is your past? And tomorrow people, how long will you last? And there's one very strong statement, which says, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. And therefore, I think we should first of all look back into the past and see how civil engineers evolved. First, there were builders, then we had master builders, and the first engineers appeared when war was increasing, was getting more professional, and then engineers were required with a more theoretic approach towards building war machines and defense structures. And only several centuries later, people came to the idea that the skills of the master builders and the war engineers could be merged to become civil engineers. And civil is the important word in this message. We are those who contribute to the civil society, but the problem is that civil engineers today are typically not aware of their impact to the society, and also not about their responsibility for humanity. And the problem is we don't see this, but it's there. If we look into music, we find a lot of themes that deal with civil engineering structures. If we look into literature, we'll find a lot of these themes. Even in religion and mythology, we'll find a lot of those civil engineering themes. And it's true, we have a high responsibility, because we are those who manipulate the environment. We are those who define the social coexistence of human beings. We are also those who have the power to connect people by building a bridge, or to separate people by building a wall. And I think civil engineering curricula should focus much more on tearing down walls, at least social walls. And if we have to build a wall, at least then we have to let it have a strong message. So civil engineers act in a completely different environment today. The world has become more complex. We have the climate change. We've got a lot of societal issues. We have a strong urge for sustainable actions. And then, do we believe we can master these challenges by being good in calculations, by being proficient in standards, or probably by applying empirical design rules? I do not believe like that. Like Michael said in the presentation before, we have to develop a consciousness for the bigger system. We have to be more complete. We have to understand the full picture. And that is what it is about. But the problem is that our curricula always teach us to become a civil engineer as it was about 100 years ago. You can see on the left side, let me see if I can activate the laser pointer. On the left side, you can see about 100 years ago or 120 years ago, a civil engineer had to be very good in calculus, but the number of materials and also the variability of materials was extremely limited, and all the rest was unimportant. But then over the course of the years, a lot of new things came, computational methods, information technologies, much more bureaucracy, and also materials have evolved and have become more complicated. But still, we try to educate civil engineers that are ready for an environment about 100 years ago. And the worst thing is that at the end of our studies, we become specialists. And the problem is that we are just dealing with our special discipline. And we are not looking at the right, at the left. We are not acting interactively. And that is a big problem, because in reality, in the light of the climate change, we really have to become civil engineering superheroes, not act as individuals. We have to become a league of superheroes where the overall talent that we're having as a group is greater than the sum of the individual talents of the people inside this group. And that is so important. And already Albert Einstein, about 70 years ago, he was not talking about civil engineers, but about students in general. He said, it is not enough to teach a man a specialty. Through it, he may become a kind of a useful machine, but not a harmoniously developed personality. It is essential that the student acquire an understanding of and a lively feeling for values. He must acquire a vivid sense of the beautiful and of the morally good. Otherwise, he, with a specialized knowledge, more closely resembles a well-trained dog than a harmoniously developed person. And Albert Einstein addressed male persons, but I think today we have to update this, and this certainly addresses male and female students. But it's so important to develop these harmoniously developed persons, because for the first time in our life, in the life of technology and of engineers, we can observe that we have to look at technology not only from a point of view of efficiency and of performance, but also from a point of view of sustainability. And if we dream of this brave new future where robots take over the processing, the casting, even the thinking is taken over by robots, we have to consider whether this is really useful and sustainable or not. Sometimes the mixtures that we are using for 3D printed concrete waste so much cement that the material saving that we're having might not overcompensate this. And also the redundancy that we're having at the moment might be lost. We have to balance this. I'm not against it. We just have to balance this and consider this. And then there's another aspect in this figure, which was developed for the German priority program, Opus Fluidum Futurum. You can see there are very, very small human beings. And then when I look at this picture, I also have to look at an experience I made. It was overwhelming in Casablanca. This is the Great Mosque in Casablanca, where I've seen all these figures, all these ornaments. This would be perfect for a 3D printer, but it was overwhelming because it was made by human beings, by crafters. They put some spirit into it. It was not perfect. It was beautiful because it was beautifully imperfect. And that is a factor which may sustain much more than the code logic of a machine. We have to think about that, particularly in combination with standards, because our standards are limiting our degrees of freedom that we are developing. And a standard, I don't want to say anything against standards. They are like medicine. If you use them in the right dosage, they are really helpful. But if they are overdosed, they can become poisonous. And the problem with our standards is that you can only standardize those things which are known from the past, but you don't know the future. So with the standard, everything is officially approved, but what comes out is mediocrity. And mediocrity is the last thing that we can need in the light of the climate change. Therefore, we have to consider what is the driving force for a civil engineer. It's the civil part, it's the society. And we certainly should look at technologies and standardization, but we have to use them to develop better society, to contribute to humanity and to sustainability. And that means we have to develop civil engineers that see the full picture, behind the facade, below the ground. And one last example before I finish is this example of Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, which used to be a hub for slave trade in the past. And if you visit this place, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, you could even say it's romantic. But if you look below the ground, right in front of the church, there was a gap, there was a hole in the ground where you could see into the face of hell, where people were stacked underground just to wait until the next boat comes around and picks them up, where they have to pass through the door of no return to have a destiny, which either ends up in the ocean or which ends up as a slave for generations. And unfortunately, the implications of this building, which was perfectly engineered, which was fully abiding the standards, they still last today. So we always have to be aware of the consequences of our actions if we build something. And that closes the circle. If you don't know your past, you don't know your future, and you will not be able to build a brighter future. And therefore, we have to teach students more about the beauty of nature, about arts and culture, history, about markets, about the micro scale, as well as about the universal scale. We have to develop more conscious engineers, and that can only be facilitated if not only the teachers talk to the students, they have the knowledge and the wisdom, but the students, they have to give something back to the teachers. The teachers also have to learn, because the students, they bring the nowness, and they also bring the affinity to current new technologies. And this has to work in synergy, and this is where Mareike is going to give a presentation afterwards, where she gives a very good case study. And eventually we have the responsibility to really encourage the next generations to become game changers, the students and also the kids. We have to mentor them to become more conscious engineers, and in return we have to learn from the children in order to make sure that the decisions that we are making today have an impact also for the next generations. And this is what afterwards Faudia and Esther will talk about, and we will also talk to the kids to learn from them. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and would like to hand over to Mareike. Mareike, are you there?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Excellently.
Perfectly fine.
Thank you. And thank you, Wolfram.
I will shortly share my screen. All right. You see my presentation, right?
Yes, perfectly fine.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Wolfram, for your great talk, and thank you very much for already introducing me. So my topic today is the case study Wolfram already mentioned. I named it Education and Knowledge Transfer, or how the TUMsania project, student project, created long-term education, engineering, and international networking opportunities. So first of all, what did we do? We named it TUMsania project, and it was actually a project which I named after global challenges with local solutions. We made a decentral building project in Tanzania, and in a cooperation between students from the Technical University in Munich and the non-governmental organization Forward Step organization, who is here today also, we built a new arts and learning center for girls. So on the right-hand side, you can see the two co-founders, Faudia and Vincent, who are here, and me in the middle. And what we actually built, you can see on the lower right. This is the Arts and Learning Center after it was finished. And why did we build this, and for whom did we build this? You can see it on the left, for the schoolgirls at the FSO. The Forward Step organization is an organization who empowers girls and women through arts and education, which is especially why we loved to build with and for this organization. Today, I will not go too deeply into the actual building project, but more in the case study, the knowledge transfer, and the creativity, how we got into the project and how we found solutions. So very shortly, this was not a common building project, but it was a joint building project between engineering students of the Technical University Munich and local tradesmen from Tanzania. You can see our building team on the upper photo. It was a really great international and intercultural teamwork. And what is really important, it was not that we went there and told them how we would like to build it, but it was a learning from each other. So we built together and we found solutions together and learned from each other. And sometimes, which was really nice, we of course explored with the next generation, the schoolgirls directly at the FSO. We could have done this more often, but I think there is much more space for further workshops. So our building approach was definitely not common, but it was out of the box. And I would say it was something in between low threshold, applicable, easy, integrated, and more or less sustainable. So if I try to compare common projects to our project, if we have common building projects, we normally use standard statics and construction, which is not what we used. We had creative solutions, and especially solutions not every constructor would say go ahead, as you can see on the left-hand side, where we try to implement an existing tree into our wall structure, which still works out quite nicely. Normally in common building projects, you use standardized building materials. We didn't have standardized building materials except for common cement, but we also looked for which materials are available and which materials would we like to use. And normally you have a team of professionals. Obviously, that was not the case for us. We had an interdisciplinary learning team where we all still were learning. So the question is, does this work? Did that work? And what did we do? So just to explain how we proceeded in the project, I would introduce you to two creative thinking processes. So the first thing is, I called it from waste over try out to research. Our problem was we would like to use more sustainable materials. And the solution was that there was rice available. And if you have the husks of the rice and you burn them, you get rice husk ashes, and they can be used as supplementary cementitious materials in concrete. Of course, this was not very easy. So we started our trial by, first of all, finding a local material collection. Secondly, starting material research. And thirdly, how could we burn it? We started searching for incineration material, which we found at a waste pit. We got all the metal waste to build the oven or the incinerator. We tried out together with the students, as you can see in the fifth picture. And finally, we saw, did it work out? Yes, we got some ash. We didn't use the ash in the actual building project, but we started the research back in Munich. So we took the ashes with us. And what I really want to point out, that this is something the students wanted and the students proceeded in. They came and wanted to do the research directly in the concrete, in the material. And we managed to do some really nice master thesis and exam terms, and finally also got to research papers with really nice results with ash as supplementary cementitious material, even performing better than cement partly. The second creative thinking process I would like to introduce you is from problem over implementation. So our problem was we would like to integrate a biological toilet because we would have liked to do another toilet without having the water system. So there are biological toilets possible. So we built the toilet seat, we built a small toilet room, and we had finally a finished biological toilet. But what we definitely missed was the training. So if you want to do something new and you actually do not know perfectly how you could implement this and how you could proceed with this sustainably, you should always think about how would you think about the solution? How would you train other people? So if you want to invent something new, plan the training and really conduct the training, that you have a sustainable change of knowledge and of people who transfer the knowledge further. So in this project, we definitely missed that, but we learned. So I will conduct this more often in further projects. So to compare our thinking approaches, I would call it build now versus standard versus innovation strategies. The first one is the build now approach, which is what we did. We got creative, we had some ideas, we searched for solution, and we just constructed them. This is definitely different compared to standardization and safety, where you really plan, dimension, and construct. the good thing is you have the safety, you have the official stamp, so you know what you will do will definitely work out. And if something happens, you will be safe. The third approach, which more or less is a combination out of them, is the newly design thinking approach, where you really go through all of the steps from emphasizing to finally testing. So really knowing, does that work what I want to do? So it's a combination between the creative way, a safe way, and searching for a compromise between them. To go from the creative thinking process to the project outcome, I would shortly say something about the durable impact of our student project. What I recognized at my students was that the people, or the young students, got really interested into other cultures and mentalities. They still are really interested in that. So they wanted to succeed in further research at our institute. They wanted to know more about the material. Also, the project got extremely popular at our university. So more students asked about if we could do a further project, which unfortunately never came. One thing is because Corona started, obviously. The other thing is that I really have to admit that these kind of student projects, even if they are so good and have such a nice impact on so many people, they are not so much supported or taken care of in the university path. So of course people like the project, but it's definitely not the first priority. The first priority is the number of publications in university life. And teaching is more the necessary evil. This is a little bit different from universities of applied sciences, where practical processes are part of education. But in universities, it's definitely something at the really border of the project or of the curricula. So it could be better. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be necessary to really value interdisciplinary student projects sustainably, also at universities within their teaching structure, time, money, and a value to really get more of these projects? How will I proceed right now? I have more ideas regarding projects, especially at the FSO, where we more get into interdisciplinary teamwork, ask the children, ask the tradesmen, and find more local solutions for global problems. But to get back, how get we even more ideas? So I get also back to what Wolfram already said. We will get back to the FSO, and we will ask the children, tomorrow people, how do you think? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That was very interesting. And I'm sure that we would also like to discuss some of your points and observations. But Wolfram advised me that we should keep back a little bit the discussion now to get the kids on board.
Yes,
they are waiting. And they
I think Esther is probably the next to present, right? According to
yes,
plan?
I am. So let me just share my screen. I hope we can all see it.
We see it, yes, it's good.
Okay, great. So first of all, my name is Esther Kamaara. I am from Kenya. Is there an echo? Sorry, 1 minute.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So like I said, my name is Esther, I'm from Kenya. The discussions so far have been very interesting. I particularly like what Mareike has just shared about the project and seeing how it comes from this very technical application to the ground level, and having the children as well as the students apply this. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction of Star Kids Initiative. So as you can see, this is a community-based nonprofit. It was founded in 2013. I am the founder, and it was founded based on the aspect that children who come from informal settlements and in Nairobi don't have access to education, to quality education. So we have 4 pillars, which is life skills development, scholarship fund, infrastructure support, and advocacy. So with the life skills development pillar, this is where I first interacted with Wolfram, actually, because what we do is we empower these children outside of the academic structure and give them skills that otherwise are not encouraged in strict academia. I don't know about you, but the Kenyan education system is very, it's about passing exams, getting A's in math and such like things, but it doesn't teach you how to gain skills outside of that. It doesn't teach you on matters sustainability, for example. So here we have impacted 500 kids. I can move on. Yes, the second one is the scholarship pillar. So as I mentioned, these kids don't have access to education, mostly because of financial constraints. So the biggest problem is the transition from primary school to secondary school, because primary school education in Kenya is free, but it is not good quality. Nonetheless, the kids get the opportunity to go. But then the biggest point of failure is when they don't transition to secondary school. So then they get into all sorts of, bad behavior, and they don't have a great future. So we try and give scholarship for that. Next is infrastructure support, which I guess is what will interest most of you, given your background is in construction. Here, what we do is we partner with schools and we make sure that children have the environment that enables them to learn. Now, in the past, we have not been able to do this sustainably. This is because, as Mareike mentioned, right, and others before, there is the aspect of funding, of the cost element to this, right? When we approach people and tell them, oh, we would like a couple of classrooms, then how sustainable the classrooms are. And this is something that we hope to change in the future through such like conversations. But so far we've impacted 3,500 children. We've done abolition blocks, building of the perimeter wall. We've done a library. And the latest is this hand washing stations to help combat COVID-19 when the kids went back to school. Last but not least is our advocacy pillar. So far, we've reached about 10,000 people. And how we do this is by having such like conversations. You can see from the picture, right? These are kids who were drawing what they think the future would look like, what they think Africa would look like in the future in terms of construction, in terms of urbanization. And we start these conversations through their drawings, and we have such conferences, we put it on the blog posts, on social media. Basically, we tell anybody who will listen to what the kids have to say. And that's why I guess we have them here today. We'll listen to them a bit later, just to push on the point that children have voices, and these are voices that we should listen to, mostly because they are innovative. They have not yet been corrupted by how the world should be. But also, as much as we can, we should listen to them. We should also invest in them, as has been said earlier, right? We need to teach them at this very young age what sustainability is, right? We'll have the opportunity to ask them questions, and they will ask us as well. And we'll be able to gauge just where is this conversation of sustainability with these children who are found in the middle of Nairobi, and they are a huge representation of children across the world. So I'm looking forward to that. And that marks the end of my presentation. I think next is Faubia.
Thank you very much, Esther. That was a very nice look into your amazing activities.
Cannot hear you.
So Faubia, should I share the YouTube video or?
Thank you, Esther. Yes.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Faubia.
Hello, can you hear me now? So,
if not, because there is a video that Faudia wanted to show, so I can probably show this video. Is this, maybe you can give me a thumb up or down, Faudia, if you can. Okay, then I will share the video. I hope everybody can hear.
we hear you. We don't hear any audio on the video.
Okay, so how can I wait?
Do you hear it on your computer?
Wait, let me see if this way it works better. Can you hear the sound now?
No.
Okay. So I do not really know how I can share the sound of that video with the audience. If not,
Using earphones?
sorry?
Are you using earphones?
Yes, I'm using earphones.
Unplug the earphones and then let it play loud, then we'll all hear.
Okay. I can't hear anything, right?
Can you hear the video?
You can't hear?
No. Do you hear the sound, Wolfram?
No, it seems I don't really see how I can change this now, because I don't have speakers. I just have my earphones.
Yeah, but I think that the advice to pull out the earphone and then just run the video as you're doing, then we will pick up the audio from your own loudspeaker.
Oh,
Yes, but the problem is I don't have loudspeakers. They are just.
Wolfram, just send me the link once, and I will directly.
You just have to look at YouTube and you search for FSO or Forward Step Organization. Okay, then I stop sharing. Yeah.
I think I have it. Let me try and share. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
In Bagamoyo, Tanzania.
Yes. Thanks.
Education, arts, technology, and entrepreneurship programs, as well as health, hygiene, and environment preservation projects to empower girls and women and the youth. Students are introduced to jewelry making, fine and performing arts to make them feel safe to explore their individual creativity and boost their self-esteem. Here, girls learn the habit of planting and sustaining plant life and environmentally friendly habits such as recycling. These nature-loving youngsters are being turned into FSO's conservationist ambassadors to their families and local schools. Vitally important roles in a community that could really use some modern knowledge in environment conservation and management. FSO pays school fees and needs for the most talented and motivated girls and young women to attend local private schools and universities, and holds evening and holiday classes to teach schoolgirls numeracy and English language skills. Meet Farida Yusuf, who is soon graduating as a teacher from the University of Dar es Salaam. Farida attended FSO's classes when she was in primary and lower secondary school.
The challenge in Tanzania is most of us complete primary school in government schools without knowing enough English. Yet, it's immediately become the language of instruction in secondary school to teach very difficult subjects such as physics, biology, geography. But English lessons I had at FSO made a difference in my academic performance from secondary school to university because I totally understood what was being taught.
My name is Josephine. I am lucky that I go to a good private primary school here in Bagamoyo. And for that reason, I don't have problems understanding subjects taught in English. I, however, have problems with mathematics. At FSO Center, they use art to make you understand the math, even if it's not really difficult.
Education has been tested. It continues to give women the chance to choose their own future. That's why schoolgirls who got pregnant during COVID lockdown and will now be discontinued from school according to the law, we cannot let these girls fall by the wayside.
In this COVID crisis and the uncertainty it has created, for us as an organization, the single most important thing we can hope for this year and the next is to keep all our girls on an education path. That way, we don't consider COVID. In its transformative community work, Forward Step organization partners and collaborates with individuals and organizations locally and internationally.
Wow, that was super good.
So and the next item was a video where we asked the different children from the Star Kids that Esther presented and also from the Forward Step organization that was presented now. And we asked them several questions about their built environment. So I think the best is if Mareike continues to share the video. Is there sound, Mareike?
Do you hear it?
We get it.
Perfect.
We have asked children about their ideas about living in the built environment, about mobility, about livelihoods, and also about those things they dislike most in their neighborhood.
The featured children are living in Mukuru, which is a neglected informal settlement in Nairobi, and in Bagamoyo, which is a village in Tanzania. They represent typical urban and rural representatives of children in many regions in the world.
Forward Step organization supports girls and young women in the
villages around Bagamoyo and Chalize districts.
Star Kids initiative mentors and takes care of children who do not have access to education. It ensures that they have the ability, the chance to go to school, and empowers them by doing activities outside the academic sphere.
Naomi, what do you like the least about your neighborhood?
First, I hate how, where I live, there are many garages. Many people pollute the environment because the diesels, the petrol, sometimes they're just let out and they're very harmful to the environment.
My name is Mareike Thiedeitz. What I dislike in my living environment is seeing trash in the streets.
My name is Faber. I don't like it when it rains and water leaks through our roof and the taps come to our doorstep. I walk through water when going to school. Our road drainage system is poor.
What I love most about my neighborhood is the house congestion and the open spaces.
I don't like that there is open sewage in my neighborhood.
I like there is about crimes and against the community. For example, there is violence, theft. These are the examples of what I like the least about my neighborhoods.
I'd like to live in a place where there are hospitals, where there are shops where to go, and we should not be located far. We should be near to where I live, and we should be offering good services.
I would like to live near my family, and I like my environment to have services like shops, supermarket, hospital, and surrounded by trees. I like to be near the hospital, school, churches, so that I can have good confidence.
I would like to live in a secure surrounding, far away from home, surrounded by the hospitals.
I would like to live in a clean environment where there is fresh air and there is not a lot of pollution around them.
I need to live in an environment which is far away from factories to prevent pollution.
How would you like your children to live?
I like my children to grow up in a good environment, good education, good facilities like hospitals, and also live the life that I have imagined.
Me, I'd like my children to live in a peaceful environment, a place where they will enjoy themselves, they will interact with people who are of importance. They will live in an environment where they have friends in nature who nurture them and who will help them with their daily activities. And also them to live in a clean environment where they not contact with any diseases.
I like my children to live in a peaceful environment and drug-free environment.
How?
I would like my children to live in a beautiful house, a place where they can play and where the schools can go.
I like my children to live in a place where there's high security and a clean environment.
My name is Josephine. I would like my children to have more freedom and live in a simple house, built with materials which don't destroy the environment and have enough space for my kids to play.
Which material would your house be made of?
I like my house to be done with the concrete, so will not be affected by the climatic conditions. Yeah. Like I said, the climate is really higher, so I like to build it with concrete. Okay. That's to build a house that is big. I like it to have a swimming pool and a big living room so that you can all be together in that fun.
I'm been given the opportunity to build a house. I would like it to be made of stones and the best quality, and I'd also like it to be a big house where I can invite many people, where I can host my meetings when I'm at home. A house filled of spaces, big windows which let the light enter freely, a space where my children will have enough to play without any confusion in the house of getting anything. Yes.
I'd like a big house made with recycled containers and a big entertainment area. I would like a medium house made of bricks.
I'd like to live in a big house that have a roof, and it will be built by stones.
Then, what is the most important part of a house?
It is a foundation which prevent it from flooding by floods.
My name is Furaha Jackson. For me, the most important part of a house is the bedroom, because everything else like cooking and toilet we can have outside.
I would like my house to have a wooden roof so that it can bring warmth.
The most important part of the house that I like is the kitchen, because I'd like the kitchen to be big because it is where I do most of my activities. I like cooking, so I'd like a big space for me to move around when I'm cooking, and a space where also when I'm cooking, anyone else can come and also join me there. Yes.
I think the most important part of the house is the kitchen because I like cooking. I think the most important part of the house is the bathroom because I like my own bathroom which is private.
What would you like to become?
I like to be a musician, so I just to my community.
In the future, I like to be a newscaster.
I would like to be a pilot in the future.
First, I'd like to be volunteer for them to become a nurse.
In the future, I would like to be a doctor.
How would you like to get to work?
I would also like to use a car once I sit in a job.
And I'd like to see a car and going to job because I don't want to become from my work.
I would like to drive a car to work.
I'd like to do work by flying. And I like to do work by car.
In the future, I would like my work to be near my house so that I can walk to work every morning.
The answers of the children are not surprising, but they are very clear. They give a very good picture about their visions, their ideas, and their dreams.
And they might be small, but they're very powerful. Therefore, we must listen to them, to both the obvious and the hidden messages, so that we can incorporate them as we design a better future.
I would like to ask a question to the children Okay?
Yep.
Can I ask you a question? By the way, I have been in Bagamoyo. I have been there. And my sister too, and my brother too. We have been in Bagamoyo to see Sawose, because they came to see our queen in Holland, where I am from, okay? But I have a question to you. What do you think I would like to live in when it is hot? When it's hot weather like at your place? What do you think I would like to live in? In a concrete block house or in a mud house that would resist the rain and you would not have to repair? What would you think I would like to live in? What do you think? In a concrete block house or in a mud house, adobe we call it all sometimes, that you would not have to repair when it rained, or that you it would resist, you do not have to maintain it? What do you think I would like to live in when it's hot?
In a mud house.
Yeah, that's it. You know, it's much fresher, and but if we can help with saying, okay, maybe if you do this or you do that, or then you would improve it very simply. Yeah. So this is why I'm so happy that we can talk, because you can do so much also for us. We can learn from this, because now rich people in South Africa, they are start living in mud houses. And you don't believe me, yeah? Is that true, Wolfram?
And not only in South Africa, also in Germany, it becomes quite a fashion and quite expensive to use adobe and clay materials. I was surprised that there was only Josephine, I think, who wanted to go to work by walking. Aren't there more children who have an idea how to probably avoid a car?
Mm-hmm. Because cars they move bad, let me say they are polluting the air when they pass because they are vehicles. So I'd like to use my own legs to go to work.
Wow. Well, you must be a very healthy boy. Girl. Or girl. Sorry, I didn't see your face.
It's very, very good to get the feedback directly from the young ones. I don't know if we can call them kids, all of them, but they look younger than Buddha.
What do you mean?
And, I think we should give them an applause for actually participating and daring. And we will listen much more to you in the future.
Maybe one last question, Michael, sorry for interrupting this, but would you prefer to live in a skyscraper or would you prefer to live in an individual house? Particularly those from Nairobi.
Individual house.
Okay. And the Star Kids in Nairobi, where it's more congested?
Okay, Star Kids.
That seems the picture is frozen.
Individual house.
You know, I really would like to do this on a regular basis with you guys. Is that a possibility? That we can make appointments sometime?
Yes.
I think we should do that. We should see, have maybe on a Friday afternoon or something like that, that we talk together, that we meet. I would really very, very much appreciate that. Okay?
Can I maybe ask?
That's an idea, huh? Okay.
Can I ask one question before you we start in interesting point. So when it comes to where we want to live, I would be interested to hear the opinion of the children with respect to how many should there be in your house? Who should live there?
Yeah, go ahead.
4.
4 persons. Who are they?
Why?
Father, mother, and 2 kids.
I'm sorry, I could not hear.
Father, mother, and 2 kids.
Okay, that sounds nice. What about the mom and dad of your dad and your mom?
That would be too much congested.
That's a good point. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Do you have questions for the kids now?
Yes.
Do you have questions for them? Mm-hmm.
Yes. First, how has involving children made a difference in the construction industry so far?
Oh, the children have not made maybe a difference now, but they are going to make a difference. And I know exactly how, okay? But we will talk about that the next time. We have a good friend of mine, Alessandro, who is waiting already 15 minutes, poor guy, if he's still there. Alessandro, but so I really would like to fix the time with you in the future, very, very near future, that we can say, this is the time for meeting with Star Kids and the other group. And Bagamoyo, of course, my favorite Bagamoyo. Okay?
Well, you should invite enough people, Boudouin. I would like to participate in that meeting too.
Fantastic. So we will check with the people here who would like to be in on it. But it is, I have a very clear idea. I already discussed with Esther what would really make sense. So I think you can go. You're going to, with the rice husk, ash, and all that. You are going to help us. I'm serious. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Fantastic. Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
See
you
you soon.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Maybe one word to the girls and to the girls from Bagamoyo and the kids from Nairobi. Really, thank you very much for attending. It's really amazing and inspiring to hear you talk and giving us your inspirations and ideas. It's really amazing. I love that. So thank you for attending.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
One more thing, just before I guess we let the kids go. I think this would be a very good opportunity. Sorry, this would be a very good. This would be. Can you hear me? This would be a good opportunity. To have at least each of the children at least tell us their name, because whenever we do such activities, one of the things is not just the knowledge sharing, which is very important, but it's also aspects like building of confidence and having them take charge of this opportunity. So if everyone could just say their name and maybe the favorite food, just so that we can get to know you a bit better. Is that okay? Okay, so maybe just your name, only your name. Everybody to just say your name.
My name is Josephine Esther.
What's your favorite food?
My favorite food is
Go ahead.
my favorite food is
Oh, we don't have to.
No, we don't have time.
okay. My favorite food in Tanzania is
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, can we have them just say just the one name, everyone, as we move quickly, because we don't have time.
Esther. My name is Josephine. My name is Furaha.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Mwanaidi Esther.
My name is Hadija.
Okay, thank you. And on the Stockhead side, quickly.
My name is Dalia. My name is Naomi.
My name is Esther.
My name is
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that was fantastic. Thank you for letting this happen. To those who were pushing this was an amazing idea. I know, Budewein, you probably want to push off with Alessandro, right? So this is what we will do. So I invite Alessandro to share the screen with the presentation.
Sure. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clearly. It's perfect.
Loud and clear. Excellent. Let me just see if I can find my slides. Obviously, it's becoming more difficult than it should just when I need them. So just bear with me 1 second. There we are. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And the very first thing that I would like to say is thank you, everyone, for having me. And I feel very much like a charlatan coming and talking to you all today, having heard from children and having heard the scale of the expectations that there are all over the place that will hopefully not be matched by disappointment that is just as enormous as the expectations that we've heard of. I mean, I come from an organization that represents everything that is detachment from reality and from the ground and distance from the problems and concerns of real people. Just a few weeks ago, I was sent a document for the creation of a new European innovation area, a 60-page document put together by some of my colleagues in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation Policy. And the word youth or young did not appear in the document a single time. No interest whatsoever into what we were doing this for and who would benefit. And also when it comes to innovation, who would actually do most of this innovating, because I doubt it's the people in the 60s and 70s calling the shots. So I start by making acts of contrition and apologizing for the fact that we don't always get it right, but it's sometimes it's one step forward and two steps backwards. But everything I've heard from civil engineers and their role in society speaks to me. I very often talk about limited liability and the fact that companies have a social function as well as many other things, including profit maximization. But I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm here to talk about the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is a department of the European Commission that is responsible for providing scientific support to the development of policies of the Commission and of the Union across pretty much every area of science and technology, all the way from policy conception to policy implementation and to policy assessment, both ex ante and ex post. It's actually quite a large organization because we have almost 3,500 staff spread across several sites in Europe. We have 2 nuclear reactors in ISPRA because we do a lot of work on nuclear decommissioning, and we do everything from food safety to cybersecurity, where the Union needs independent, high-quality scientific advice. It is provided by the Joint Research Center of the Commission. It's an organization that does not just have over 3,000 scientists. We also have some unique facilities and laboratories and databases and models that we maintain that are pretty unique. I mean, you can see some of them in these pictures, but everything from emissions testing all the way to interoperability of electric vehicles and smart grids is being done at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. My personal interest and my role of the Commission is essentially to run the Technology Transfer Office of the European Commission. So to help with the exploitation and commercialization of anything interesting that our scientists discover or develop that could have useful societal applications. We're not in it for the money, and we're neither Stanford nor MIT, so it's a very small set of patents and copyright in very specific fields, but some of them have useful applications, and if there's a reason to think that they do, it generally lands on my desk. But from that, which is probably the original job description, we have moved into trying to help and support the challenge of commercializing research results or pushing research results from the laboratory onto the market. And a few years ago, we set up a competence center on this. And I mean, what do we mean by technology transfer? This is a picture of Death Valley, and it's that sort of process of translational research where you get research from the lab to a point where they're actually turned into products and services that can actually be deployed onto the market, attract investments or attract users or have a positive impact on the society and the economy. Now, everyone, including the EU, of course, has been trying to help technologies cross this valley of death. But in most cases, what happens is that you take them from the beginning of the valley of death and then you abandon them in the middle of the valley of death without ever actually getting them to the other side, which is less than ideal, if you ask me. And I mean, I'm not going to go into all the details and all the stages and everything else. I think a lot of the people, especially those with a technical or research background, understand the essence of the problems, how you help with financing, getting laboratory prototypes, getting a proof of concept working, dealing with the industrial scale-ups of certain technologies, trying to figure out how you're going to manufacture at scale, how you're going to attract the necessary investment to do that, and so on and so forth. We work on all of these issues, not just by ourselves, but we work with a pretty big network of all the large research centers, mostly public research organizations in Europe, from TNO all the way to Fraunhofer, the CERN in Geneva, even the UK research councils, the Weizmann Institute in Israel, trying to understand how you can support technology commercialization and technology exploitation. And we look at it as quite a holistic problem, because it's not just about here's a new device, a new formulation, a new molecule, or a new chemical, or in fact a patent or a piece of intellectual property. It's a process that requires a lot of skills. It's a process that can be very, very expensive, so it requires money as well. And it's a process that happens somewhere and within an ecosystem, a geography, or in any way a place. So you need to consider all of those elements if you're going to do that successfully. And more specifically, you need to look at the whole sort of overarching regulatory framework, whether you look at the level of a region or a country, whether there are adequate IP protection systems, adequate industry, academia, cooperation mechanisms, adequate intellectual property ownership frameworks. And then once you go down to the level of individual institutions, whether it's universities or research centers, you're talking about, you've got policies and procedures, licensing policies, IP policies, spin-off policies, contract research policies, and so on and so forth. And last, but of course not least, to make that process work, you need people that have the necessary skills and understanding in how to identify promising technologies, how to protect them, how to get them out onto the market, how to raise investment, how to incorporate them in spin-out businesses if that is necessary or not. As I said, it's an expensive process, because none of this comes free of charge. So there's all sorts of questions that we work on around how do you raise investment to fund this type of process. Does technology commercialization work with grants and subsidies? Do researchers just go ahead and make more publications if you give them a grant, or do they actually bother to develop a product or a service? If you don't give them a grant, then how do you do it? Do you give them a loan? What do you secure that loan against? Do you use equity instruments? Well, equity in what? Do you have to incorporate the technology into a company? Do you use quasi-equity instruments? Do you use convertible instruments? Where does the money come from? How do people pay you back? How do you ensure that a beneficial piece of technology doesn't end up in the hands of scrupulous investors and venture capitalists that just want to make a quick buck? And I'm sorry, there seems to be something awful going on with the slides, but this is the slide that I wanted to get onto. It's last but not least, there's the question of where does all of this happen? This is a picture of the high-tech campus in Eindhoven, and I think we have taken a significant amount of interest in what some of this highly dense innovation ecosystems look like, where you've got universities and companies and research centers and incubators and accelerators and startups and early stage investors look like, and also on how you put them together and how you manage them in terms of getting both the public and the private sector to play nicely together, because more often than not, the public sector has a tendency to contribute land or legacy site. It has an interest in redevelopment, and the private sector and especially the construction industry has got different benchmarks and different ideas and reasons for going into this type of project. So you need to sort of reconcile them and figure out how to get them to play well together. And there's a few examples of things that are happening across Europe on that front. There's some very significant developments that are taking place a little bit all over, and it's all about how to bring all the stakeholders together, how to network them, and how to understand what drives all of them in what is a fairly complex system. And we are trying to create a system of that type of our own on some of the JSC sites, because we are transforming some of our sites effectively into living labs where some technologies and some possibilities can be piloted and explored. And a lot of that is linked to technologies for smart cities and for smart living, including, of course, technologies connected to buildings and the built environment, smart grids, and whatever else have you. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about very quickly is also there's another initiative that is kicking off at the European Commission pretty much as we speak, and it's the new European Bauhaus, for which the construction industry, with its massive carbon footprint globally, is a very relevant player that should probably get involved. Now, this new European Bauhaus is a very strange animal, and I must confess that even to me exactly what it's supposed to do and how is not clear yet, because they've only started working on it very recently. But it's supposed to be essentially a design lab, an accelerator, and a network that should help to develop some kind of a shared vision of the built environment, together with a dispersed community of stakeholders and users. And that vision is the vision that should be adopted and pushed forward by the European Green Deal. So effectively, it's the creation of a strategic roadmap for what we're going to do with the Green Deal, especially in the urban built environment. It's a transformational project, and it's meant to develop as a very bottom-up initiative, so not something dictated from above, but something whose focus is determined very much by the users and the stakeholders. And I think somewhere along the line it makes sense, because the challenge is enormous. The Green Deal has a significant side, but if we look, and I'm not mentioning Kearney because he's Mark Kearney, but I think just a few weeks ago he gave an interview in which he said that the green transition is going to cost $3.5 trillion every year for the next 30 years. So the amount of capital that needs to be mobilized is enormous, and there needs to be a shared vision behind that type of mobilization, including not just the public sector, not just the stakeholders, but also private capital, because without mobilizing private capital, it's going to be impossible to do that. And I think the Bauhaus, somewhere along the line, is meant to help bring all those pieces together and build and strengthen that constituency to provide the political momentum that is necessary to move forward. And just in terms of where we are right now, at this point in time, between now, between October of last year, in fact, and the summer, it's being co-created through a series of consultation and roundtables with the thinkers and practitioners. And this will hopefully translate into 5 new European Bauhaus pilots. So 5 centers or physical facilities or networks. This I still have no understanding of what these are going to be, whether it's going to be a man and a dog, or whether it's going to be 3 people around the table, or whether it's going to be several skyscrapers. But they will select 5 sites across Europe to host these new entities, and this will operate until the beginning of 2023, and then disseminate results that will hopefully drive the operationalization of the Green Deal. And I think it's something that it would be interesting to get involved in from the point of the construction and the concrete industry, simply because I think it's such an important piece of the bigger jigsaw. And I think that's where I would like to stop for now. And I hope it was interesting for the people that have been patient enough to listen to me. And I'm here if there's any questions or anything more that anyone would like to know.
I have a question for you, Alessandro. What are the chances for public-private partnership for knowledge transfer? That means that includes education, but it also includes the search for benchmarking. And I could imagine the private sector being interested because they would like to have educated people. So what do you think is the chance? And before you answer this, I put this question 10 years ago already to the Commission, because I had a very favorable experience in Quebec, in Canada, where the Quebec Development Corporation, probably the only name that was in English, was very actively involved in setting up a factory in Bécancour with a German company, and I was involved in this project. So, question: public-private partnership. Is that a dirty word in Brussels?
Public-private partnership is not a dirty word in Brussels, and I would add to that, unfortunately, because what seems to happen in the vast majority of cases is that public-private partnerships are used as a tool to, pardon my French, screw the public sector for the interest of the private sector. Okay. Which is not something that we necessarily want. And part of the reason why that happens is because it's in part because it is difficult to make those two speak together and understand each other, and the private sector ends up outsmarting the public sector. But it's also because very often the public sector doesn't have the skills to actually value correctly what it is that they are giving to the private sector, and they sell it off too cheaply. And that is certainly an issue, and I can give you many examples of that, but maybe in unrelated domains. But we have worked, for example, I have worked on concessions concerning the construction of hospitals and everything else. And what you see very often is that the public sector gives a contract to the private sector for constructing a hospital, but they fail to estimate correctly the amount of revenues and benefits that the hospital will generate. So they actually pay the private sector more than they should, considering the amount of money the private sector will be able to earn from it. And that's just a question of competences and skills and knowledge of the public sector partner. But more specifically on what you're saying on the concept of education, I'm not even sure that I'm answering your question precisely, but there's an interesting project that we're working on at the moment, a little bit on the sort of impact investment side. And what we are interested in is we're trying to understand, there's a lot of funds that are being distributed all over the place, especially in the Western Balkans and in Central and Eastern Europe, by the EBRD, by the European Commission, by the World Bank and everything else. And they're making investments in new technologies or in the commercialization of new technologies. But what they don't invest in is the skills base and the knowledge that the people involved in developing those technologies and that ecosystem needs to be able to do more of it by itself and for itself. And we are doing a study just now where we're trying to think, is there a way of convincing certain categories of investors to set aside maybe 10 or 15 or 20% of every investment fund that is raised to actually do training and education in order to make the impact of those investments more sustainable in the long term. And I cannot give you an answer about whether it's going to work or not, but I know we've got all the right people around the table, at least to talk about it and think whether it could be done. I wonder if that goes in the direction you were thinking of, Budevic.
Definitely, because I think on one thing everybody agrees on is better education, and throwing money against the education is not always the solution. It is if you can streamline this, but it starts basically with identifying, of course, what is best practice. We discussed it during a very nice lunch in Brussels. You remember that when you do a transfer of knowledge, it should be the best practice. Okay. So I think in the domain of professional education, maybe there is hope. Okay, we could try. We could try to see this, because your observation of the 60 pages that there was not one word of use and the future people using this. It's a classic mistake. Not to ask the users what they think of, that they buy something and then they say, this is it. And we had some fantastic examples of the Eco Procura about that. We'll talk about another time. And so maybe we can formulate that one of these days to see, okay, could this fly? Okay.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Yeah, can I found it very nice to hear your presentation, Alessandro. But just two points. Talking about technology transfer, it sounds, even the sentence sounds a little bit sterile, right? So you take with a pincet something and move it from A to B. We have to remember that there are people involved. And you don't transfer best practices because best practices are something which are local. You cannot do that. Best practices is a technology in a context. So we have to be extremely careful. And I think we have made so many mistakes on that point.
It can be inspiring, maybe, or you call it inspiration,
Yes, but this technology transfer, it's something to be enjoyed with significant care, right?
Yeah.
Because you cannot transfer context.
Yeah, not only you cannot transfer context, but what a lot of people don't understand is that you cannot transfer a technology without the know-how that is wrapped around it.
That's it, and that was my second point. What we actually should focus on is not the best practice. Of course, we all need to know what's available, but what we really need to know is how appropriately and adequately to challenge best practice. This is where we need to move. We should never get stuck in best practice. This is a misconception. We should always be able to see where the fallacies are, where the potentials for improvement or adjustments are to be found. And this is what we really want with these kits, which we saw earlier today, because they're totally challenging best practice. And this is right where we want them.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
This is Professor Areski from Sherbrooke University. Thank you very much, Mr. Fazio, for the excellent presentation and also for what you are trying to do there. And I think really we need this kind of support if we want to bring something to the reality. Unless a big support like this, or I don't know very well your program, this will stay in the labs and will stay, especially when we speak about small companies who are very smart and bring very good ideas, but they don't have enough money to bring it, to go all over this very hard process and long process to the field, and also that the material or the technology will be fully accepted by the population and the stakeholders. Now, the question I have, and I didn't see in your presentation, and that I think we suffer a lot in the field, is the standardization. I saw licensing and things like that, but when we go to the concrete, standardization is a very, very important process, especially that the standards are there to protect the population. So they are, by essence, conservative and long process. So how the innovation and especially the sustainability can be accelerated and bring it to the field, even taking in consideration the protection of the population. We can just see those examples that we have actually with the vaccines. So they were able to accelerate, but the population still afraid. So I will present something tomorrow, but we got standard, but it took 15 years to arrive to this goal. And if we don't find a way to speed the process and also to protect the population in the same way, it will be very, very difficult. So I don't know what you think about this.
Okay, the first thing I should say is that I am not a specialist in standardization, certainly not in the concrete industry, but we are very, 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 very active as an organization in standardization, and we drive standardization in a number of domains. My experience with the standardization in completely different sectors, specifically in the mobile telephony sectors and everything else, is that you've always got a lot of people around the table, and you need to establish whose interests the standard is going to serve before anything else, and who is going to benefit from the standard and how. And sadly, I don't think that all parties involved necessarily enter a standardization exercise in good faith with the interests of the users at heart. And that's part of the reason why the standardization process is so lengthy and so complex. In certain high technology sectors, one of the reasons why standardization works, however, is because standardizations provides the certainty about technological solutions and approaches that companies need to make the necessary investments. So you've got a carrot there as well as a stick, where you basically say, if you agree on these interoperability standards, you know what you should spend your money developing for the next 2 years until the next generation of platforms or semiconductors or whatever comes along. As I said, I don't know enough about the concrete industry specifically, but I suspect that you must recognize some of the dynamics that I described.
May I comment on this? I worked in a field where we make extreme fast progress in material technology because we did only have testing standards. We agreed worldwide, this is how you test refractory concrete, whatever. This is how you test it. Goodbye, go ahead, work with it, okay? The other thing is we have a methodology that was really developed in Canada, which was brought to by Joint Research Center Sevilla to Paris, where I saw it in 2007, and that was called a verification process. Somebody says, this product does this, this, and that, and then the customer would say, well, should I believe you? Then there is a third party saying, well, what he is saying is correct. He is not saying what he's saying is relevant or not. That is between you, supplier of the innovation, and the potential customer. This is what we applied when we did a underpass for ProRail in cement-free concrete, okay? And we applied a whole range of things that should be verified if this was true. The problem is that we are stuck with prescriptive standards, and there the battle starts. You have to put so much of my product in that, otherwise your product is no good. That's where we are stuck in right now. Everybody, Wolfram especially, will understand what I'm talking about. So if we look only, this is how you test it. Afterwards, go ahead and do it and convince the customer. with verification credibility.
I'll just tell you one story for 1 minute, and then I think there was Mareike who had a question. But
sorry.
Not even Chatham House rules. Please don't repeat this. Quite simply, but a few years ago, we are responsible for the verification mechanisms of a certain standard for a certain type of insulation materials. What that means is that we test the said materials to check that they comply with specifications laid down in a regulation, but we also manage an appendix to the regulation which lists the materials that can be used for this particular type of insulation. So a few years ago, we had a very interesting case because someone came to us and asked us to certify a certain type of insulant because it performed according to the specifications laid down in the regulation, even though it was not any of the listed materials contained in the appendix. Now, it was again, pardon my French, a massive shitstorm. Why? Because said material not only performed according to specifications, but actually performed better than the specifications laid down in the regulations. It was a different chemical composition from anything we had in the appendix, but it was also 40% cheaper than any of the materials currently on the market. So if we certified it for use, we'd be putting out of business all of the existing manufacturers of this particular type of insulation. And they were, of course, arguing that we shouldn't recognize it as compliant because the material it was made of was not listed in the appendix to the regulation, even though it performed not just according to specifications, but even better. It's just one example of how complicated and political and economic and difficult anything linked to standards can get.
Well, thank you. Can I also come with a small comment regarding? I'm sorry, I broke in, Mareike. You go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I really have a thriving question. So thank you very much, Alessandro, for your talk. It was definitely something I didn't know about, or the European Bauhaus was not something I'm really familiar with. But I have a question regarding the issues of sustainability. So for me, it currently gets like there are so many innovations or initiatives which are called sustainable innovation strategies, smart technology, where very much is funded and where much money is spent into, but it's questionable how much sustainable, and I mean sustainable in meaning sufficient and really get the world like generation friendly, socially friendly, and especially naturally friendly or ecologically friendly, by of course still getting the compromise of economically friendly, but we have the talk that we have just one earth. So the question is there from the European Bauhaus, is there something like a transparent document or a transparent declaration how sustainability is really valued, and how I know if a project gives me a like generation friendly outcome, or how is the sustainability defined with the European Bauhaus and further sustainable financial projects?
A very good question indeed. I think we don't have all of the answers to those questions yet, but some of the pieces are starting to emerge. So if I tackle your last point first, the European Commission has recently enacted a sustainable finance disclosure regulation, which is, it came into force on the 10th of March, just 6 days ago. And it is accompanied by a taxonomy on sustainable activities. And what this means is that all financial market operators that either operate in the union, that have activities in the union, or that operate in third countries but have connections of any type with the union, will need to look at the entirety of the portfolios and projects and assess their sustainability through a system of indicators, analysis, benchmarks, and everything else. Now, you can be as cynical as you like about the exercise. Is it greenwashing or is it not greenwashing? Does it go far enough? Does it not go far enough? Could we have gone further? Did we stop too early? All legitimate questions. My view, however, is that we are the first ones to do this. There's no one else that has done anything so extensive that imposes such extensive sustainability reporting requirements on financial market operators. We, as an influential trading bloc, we are likely to lay down standards or expectations which might be followed globally. I mean, we know that we are in discussions already with the US, we're in discussions already with the UK. And I think ultimately, this is not just about allowing investors and corporations to do greenwashing, it's also about allowing the demand for sustainable investments and sustainable projects is not just coming from large corporations. It is coming from institutional investors. It is coming from large-scale public banks, sovereign wealth funds. Why? Because ultimately it's the general public that is demanding it. And so we're actually answering to a concern of people like all of us around this table that are saying we want to know where our money is going and how our money is actually helping to tackle some of the problems that we have. So that's the last piece of answering your question. Is there a document with definitions specifically on the European Bauhaus? There's huge websites with hundreds of documents. I haven't seen a specific working definition of sustainability for the Bauhaus. I'm sure there is one, but I think it's all linked, and this taxonomy on sustainable activities is a very big part of the jigsaw, and I think we are trying to put the other pieces together, but we're not done yet.
Thanks, Alessandro. Mareike, I was just getting the idea that maybe input in that direction you're asking for. So, what is the understanding of sustainability in the context of the Bauhaus, right? Maybe this is something where you and others could contribute to the, let's say, directing all these efforts. I think it's a very valid question. But Mareike, you also mentioned looking into the future generations, right? I think we need to be very careful when we talk about sustainability, at least it's worthwhile a debate, right? Because the way I see sustainability, for sure, it has a temporal dimension, looking at future generations. Yes, for sure. This is what we hear all the time. But what about our own generation across borders? Are we not looking for equity also at geographical scale within the same time? And do we imagine that we can ever move towards sustainability if we don't open up for that dimension? And this is why this initiatives for sustainable development, they have to be inclusive, they have to be global, right? Otherwise, we will never be able to get on the same path if we only look ahead for our own kids and their kids and whatnot within the silos of the nation states. So I just wanted to mention that. But Alessandro, coming back to you, the private-public partnership, I think that they are very good examples for successful partnerships. I'm looking back at Denmark in the 90s and the 2000s, where we were fighting to introduce some energy consumption developments. And that at the same time, the industry, they also felt the pressure to perform better, but they could not. And it's the same thing now when we talk about sustainability in the built environment. Due to competitive reasons, they all know basically what should be done, and the technologies which are missing, it's the usual 80%, 20% kind of question. We know the solutions of 80%, right? And we need to focus in order to find the remaining 20%. But for competitive reasons, the industry could not move alone. So what was really needed from the side of the public was to introduce standards and regulations which would make it equal for all industries to engage in the quest. We have exactly that issue now when it comes to sustainability in the built environment. The industry, they know what to do. They also know that in many cases in the first 5 or 10 years, solutions will be a bit more expensive. Maybe that will be permanent. Maybe we have to live with the fact that some things will be less cheap. But we need a common denominator. Otherwise, we will not come there. And the Euro codes could have been such a common denominator in this round of the revisions. But that is another good case of private-public partnerships where it failed, because the industry totally took over this revision and focusing on the bottom line, focusing on ease of use and limited liability. So, but it would have been a very good opportunity.
I have already a long time a solution in my head, but maybe this is not the moment right now to present it. But I really would like to discuss this further in the coming weeks, because the time is really ripe for it. So I'd love to see some of you guys back very, very soon on this, because I think if you can sit in between the public and the private with a minority share, with a temporary development where the ethics are very well defined, and the whole structure, and then you say after 3 years, goodbye, let's capitalize on it for everybody. Maybe this could be a possibility. The small partner in between. Alessandro, we had Michael and I had established very good contact with private investors, with the NGO in Colorado. He is not there at this time, but it's an NGO selecting for the investors, people very rich who want to sell, to buy their place in heaven and get absoluted by the sins in their life. They have lots of money and they want to spend it very well. So there is a lot of money available, but indeed you pointed at it. We see very good public-private partnerships, and we see those that are miserably failing. Public housing is one of them in the Netherlands, which is disaster. Okay, railroads is not so bad. Okay, and so on. But I think the time is ripe that Global Consensus Group and the Pantheon Performance idea, because it's not more than this at the moment. It came out of a European project, though. But we have the vision and we have some ideas, especially how to guide it towards the children, towards education, evaluating the vocational skills that are so incredibly important for performance of structures and so on. So I'd like to, before the end of this month, you will have a plan on your desk, and then please shoot on it, okay? That's...
Yeah, I apologize, guys. I'm gonna have to leave for another meeting, unfortunately. And I'm already running 4 minutes late, but I'm happy to continue the discussion at your earliest convenience.
It was super nice and very enriching that you were here, Alessandro. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me,
Alessandro.
We will follow up on your kind offer.
Very good.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks.
Bye. Well, I think, Bodewijn, that we are approaching the end of the program, right?
We are already, we extended it a lot. We were supposed to have finished at 4:30, so we're doing okay.
Yes. Well, if you think it's okay, then I suggest that we wrap it up for today. I think we had very inspiring presentations, and not least, and this is what I enjoy even more, are the discussions, the ideas, and the implicit networks we are building up at the same time. So it is a fantastic process. And I thank you for all participation. Thank you for your active participation as well, and all the efforts which you have put into it to make it happen. Bodewijn and colleagues and all presenters, thank you for this.
Thank you too, by the way, especially for Esther, our guest today in our living room here in Amsterdam. Esther is really an asset for us, because the link of sociology is so obvious. We have neglected, maybe, you know, we forget that we are building for people, you know.
Exactly.
So
we couldn't
this
agree
is
more.
very enriching, and all the other people, some of them I don't know yet, but I look forward to further communicating with all of you personally.
Thank you for today, and see you all again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.